Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Made Futures Live. Today we have Phill Mason. Phill is the Business Development Manager at Ontic, a leading supplier of end assemblies and parts, as well as repair and overhaul services for mature aerospace platforms. So every week leading up to the Made Futures exhibition, we will be holding these type of interviews with members who have submitted articles to the Made Futures book. The Made Futures book will also be distributed this month, so make sure to get your copy. So today we invited Phill to speak to you and learn more about his journey working in manufacturing and how he went from apprentice to manager during his career. So thank you for joining us today, Phill. Firstly, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Ontic?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, I'm currently working as a business development manager within Ontic, but my previous roles, I've been the head of supply chain and I've been the head of military programs. So it's a bit of a progressive career that I've had. As we'll touch on a bit later, I originally started in manufacturing as an engineer, and now I've worked my way through into business development. Ontic is a global leader in aerospace and defense legacy, and it's quite a critical part of how we describe what we do, because we don't do any kind of research and design. We're not looking to get onto the next big platforms. What we actually do is we acquire intellectual property from other OEMs and sustain their products through the legacy part of the product cycle.
Great, thanks for that, Phill. So you submitted an article to the Made Futures book, and it's a really interesting one, and it's about how you started out as an apprentice, and now within your career you've progressed to being a manager. So let's start at the beginning. When did you know about you wanting to join the manufacturing industry? Tell us more about the first apprenticeship you did and how you discovered the opportunity back in 1999.
So to be honest, I never wanted to get into manufacturing. Originally, I joined the Army. I was an avionics technician on Apache helicopters, and my dad died in 1999, and I came out of the Army and needed something to do. So I grew up where I live now, actually, in a small town in North Devon. There's not a huge amount to choose from, unless you're good at farming, good at surfing, or want to serve pints to people during the summer. There's not a massive amount, but I managed to come across this apprenticeship opportunity with a company called Cronite Outcast. So I went for the interview. It was not very much money. It was a dirty work environment. It was hard work, working in a foundry. It's not that great, but something about the guy who interviewed me really interested me in the business. And he really sold the idea of going into work, learning about what you're doing, learning the broader subject, and then progressing through manufacturing. So I figured if he was willing to give me a go and enroll me on an apprenticeship course, then manufacturing was something I wanted to try.
Yeah, of course. And that's really interesting that you say, you didn't actually want to get into manufacturing. But when was the turning point for you? When did you realize, actually, this is the career I'd like to progress in?
Oh, it was really early into my time at Cronite. They still run now. They're called a different name now, but they make aluminium castings. And my job to start with was collecting metal samples called mushrooms, just machining the surface from them and then doing a spectrograph analysis. And just for that first job, while I was learning my way around, I got to interact with guys that were pouring the material, people that were machining components, people that were heat treating, and also got involved in the metallurgy. And it was so varied. And, even though I was just doing a tiny, tiny part of the job, I got to interact with so many different functions that it really, really made me think this is something interesting, something I could get used to.
Yeah, definitely. So this job at the foundry that you're talking of now, was that with your apprenticeship in 1999? Was that?
Yeah, so I started my apprenticeship there. Mm-hmm. The guy who took me on was a guy called Bill Stott. Fantastic man. He was so technically gifted in foundries. and he's famous throughout the industry. And I was really, really fortunate that I got to work for him. But halfway through my first apprenticeship, he moved from the foundry I was at to Aeromet in Worcester. And Aeromet was, a big deal. Yeah, they did the biggest castings, they did the strongest castings. It was the top of the game. And he asked me to move with him. And that really cemented then that not only was it something that I found interesting, but it was something that I was good at.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I started my apprenticeship in North Devon, and then I moved to Worcester and went to Worcester Technical College to carry on the rest of my apprenticeship.
Ah, right. Okay. So in the article, you mentioned that you worked at this foundry for four times a week. So what did you get up to there, and what stood out to you most? Doing your apprenticeship.
So, I mean, I got to make it clear. I mean, this was 20 something years ago, and I was very much treated as the apprentice. I was sent for long waits and tartan paint and all sorts of things like that. But I think once I moved to Worcester, I had a grounding in the processes. I'd learned quite a bit in my day release. So my Monday to Thursday, I was focused on the ceramic slurries. So that involved a lot of chemical analysis. We were working with ammonia, with alcohol, with slurries, dry powders. I was also doing robot programming because the slurry was applied to the components using robots. And I was getting really involved in the day-to-day work, but then going to college and learning the theory behind it. Now, I'll be honest, the first year or so, the theory didn't really suit somebody that's working in a foundry. The foundry content on a mechanical engineering apprenticeship is about 3 hours. But learning the wider manufacturing processes, learning the science behind it, learning the maths that's used in the other processes gave me a really broad understanding of manufacturing and engineering in general.
Yeah, of course. So now I'm just moving along a little. What did your second apprenticeship involve? Because I know you moved on in order to get this role as a manager at Ontic. You moved on to do a second apprenticeship. So why did you decide to do that, and what did that involve?
So this apprenticeship, I'm still in it.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to be finished in about 5 or 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not your standard, what I would call standard manufacturing apprenticeship. So this is an apprenticeship for me to do my MBA.
Mm-hmm.
So over the last just over 2 years, I've been at the University of Gloucestershire, working in their business hub, and we do 8 modules of learning, but it's day release kind of in the same way as my original apprenticeship was, that you actually sign up to a contract where your employer says they will give 20% of your time so you can do the study.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this doesn't mean that I got day release every week, but what we would do is every couple of months, we'd have a couple of days of lectures. Then you'd have time where you have to do some reading, some researching. And I was really fortunate with Ontic. One of the module options is to do an international study. And the international study made available to my cohort was to go to New York. And so my company made it so I could go and do that. Unfortunately, we went just as COVID was kicking off in March 2020. And the line was so tight that before our flight took off, we were okay to go and all of the study activities were still going on. By the time we landed and got into the airport 7 hours later, it was cancelled and they were starting to close down the city.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you missed out on that opportunity, but you decided to do this apprenticeship, and which is an amazing thing to do so far into your career already. So what would you say is the difference between sort of apprenticeships then and apprenticeships now? What would you say, the benefits of now, or what would you say the difference is overall?
I think they're two very different things. So an apprenticeship at the start of your career is fantastic because you can earn as you learn. And I think that was the big thing that appealed to me, was rather than having come out of the army, go back to college or go to university, I could actually earn some money. It wasn't great money, but I could actually earn some money. So earning whilst learning, that was great at the start. For me, doing this now, it means you can fit it in around the rest of your life. You know, I've got 4 children. I've got a busy wife who's a nurse going through the pandemic. As you saw earlier, I've got dogs that run around here uninvited. So we've got a really, really busy lifestyle. But because this is an apprenticeship, it means apart from the set days of lectures, you can actually do your study early in the morning or late at night or at weekends or on your lunch breaks, whenever you like, and you can fit it in around everything else that's going on in your life. And it was very good. And it was fairly flexible. You still have to stick to certain time frames, but you know, we're talking maybe 3 months from when you first do the lectures to when you have to submit a paper. And within that period, you've got a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, you know, there's actually a lot of stigma around apprenticeships, isn't there? I would say, just in terms of, you know, younger people getting into apprenticeships. And so as somebody that's already, you know, progressed within their career, what advice would you offer to older apprentices, I'd say?
Well, leave the stigma behind, to be honest. I mean, apprenticeship, for someone who's further into their career, if it's someone that wants to learn a new skill or they're just enabling themselves to be better at what they do already, apprenticeship's a route to payment. You know, it's a way of the company investing in you. So rather than having to invest in upfront fees or online universities and things like this, you can use your existing apprenticeship credits to train other people within your organization. So whether it's an apprenticeship or it's distance learning, it doesn't matter. What I think is important is that the companies who are investing in sort of 16, 17, 18-year-old apprentices, I think them being benefited from doing that and being able to invest in their older employees is a really, really good scheme. And I think more and more companies should take this up as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's quite prominent in the manufacturing sector, I'd say. Just, you know, putting this book together is seeing the vast opportunities within the sector, and especially for those already working within the sector to upskill. So, you know, there's benefits sort of all round, isn't there?
Yeah, no, it's hugely beneficial. And it gives you access to training that you wouldn't ordinarily get. You know, it's very hard for a 30-something, 40-something-year-old to commit to 3 years worth of study. But if you've got something that's actually work related and benefits the company, incentivise the company even more. So a prime example of that, my dissertation, so I can get my MBA, is work related. So I'm not just writing an academic paper that's going to go off to some professor somewhere and he's going to read it and say, very well done. The conclusions and the recommendations that are in there actually relate to the company. And part of the scheme that I'm on, it's linked to the CMI, and I can then write a further report, go through interviews and a portfolio process, and if I'm successful, I'll also get chartered manager status. So there's a real benefit, and it's a tangible benefit that the company can take away from it.
Yeah, definitely. And just going back to what we were discussing a moment ago, you know, you said that your wife is a nurse and she's having to work a lot, especially to do with the pandemic, and then you're also doing an apprenticeship whilst, you know, trying to bring home the money for your family. So in the article you mentioned that you attended Worcester Technical College and that it was quite difficult at the time. So what other advice would you offer to those considering apprenticeship who may be in the same sort of situation? What advice would you give to them already been there and done that?
I think I learned very quickly that any time that your work gives you to do study, take it. So, I mean, we used to go to college on a Thursday, and quite often our lessons would finish at 2:00. Now, I know probably 3 or 4 of the guys that were on my course. Once that happened, they were off to the pub. It was a bonus afternoon. They could go and play pool, do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
But there were others, and I was halfway. where we would then use that afternoon to do some reading, do some writing, do some of the essays. We weren't doing research, but actually using that time to do the work that we needed to do, because on a Friday you're then back into work. You've got to catch up the stuff you didn't do on Thursday. Saturday and Sunday you got stuff with the family. Before you know it, you're going back into college for your next day release.
Yeah.
And you haven't done any of that extra work. So any time that gets allocated, make the most of it. I think also I was fortunate. I sort of came with a mentor. Bill, who took me on in the first place, he very much became my mentor for many years afterwards. And I think it's key when you're doing an apprenticeship to find your own version of Bill. It's find someone in the company who's been there, who's done it, who's knowledgeable, and not necessarily because you want to become them, but someone who can guide you, someone who can look at you and say, stop being stupid, knuckle down, do your work, but also someone who can say, well, that's not reality. This is what we do in the real world. Have a balance between the academics and the real world.
Yeah, definitely.
I think from this time round, it's almost exactly the same advice. It's be flexible, be willing to do work, because again, within my cohort, we've got people from lots and lots of different areas of business, not just manufacturing. And some of them like to work late at night. Some like to do it on a Saturday. Others like to do it at work. There are some who actually have been given 1 day a week when they can do it. Just be flexible, be able to take the opportunities when you can, to do some reading, to do some writing. And you don't have to just sit down for a whole week and do all of it in one go, little bits as you go along.
Yeah, most definitely. So just from your first apprenticeship, tell us a bit more about your journey. So what did you do to progress after your apprenticeships, and what would you say helped you get there?
Okay. So I've done most things within manufacturing. So I've designed it, I've made it, I've inspected it, assured it, I've bought it, I've sold it. And I think doing my first apprenticeship gave me a really broad knowledge of manufacturing. So it meant that when I progressed through engineering for a while, and then I moved into quality, and I was looking at inspection, I was looking at measurement, whilst also having a technical knowledge behind me. Then I progressed into continuous improvement and project management. And then I went back into quality because I really enjoyed it. And I spent probably 7 or 8 years really focused on quality. I worked at Rolls-Royce, Snecma, Thales. I went out of aerospace for a couple of years into Alstom, because their industrial gas turbines are basically aeroplane engines bolted to the ground. And then I came back into aerospace. And I think just having that ability to learn and work really, really stood me in good stead. So being able to do 40, 50, 60 hours a week when it's needed, but still have an interest in learning. Read about processes, read about techniques. When I was learning to become an auditor for AS 9100, I had to be able to carry on doing my project management work, carry on doing some of my quality assurance work, run a small team, and do my studying at the same time. And I think being an apprentice helps. I mean, I've got a 19-year-old who's at university, and he won't thank me for saying this, but he's got it really easy at the moment. Because he literally just has to do some online lectures, do some reading, do some writing. And then the rest of the time, he's playing Call of Duty or FIFA and having fun with his friends. Whereas if you've got to work and you've got to study and you've got to have a social life, you've got to find that blend. And so I think the apprenticeship, the skills I learned as an apprentice helped. And then moving through to where I am now within Ontic. I mean, Ontic is a rapidly growing company. When I joined 6 years ago, I think I was employee 100 on the Cheltenham site, and we're over 370 now.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So
a lot of progression.
Really rapid growth. And I started at the company working in quality. Then, as I moved into heading up the supply chain function, and then military programs, but they give opportunity. So anybody that's willing and able, then they'll fully back you. And you need more employers like that. But you also need more employees like me.
Yeah.
They're willing to say yes and then go and work out how they can do it.
Yeah, most definitely. Okay, so I just have one more question for you today, Phill. So you mentioned the benefits of doing an apprenticeship. You know, you earn whilst you learn. Especially in manufacturing, you have the opportunity to move around the business and really figure out, you know, where you fit in. But just to finish off, what would you say other benefits of doing an apprenticeship, especially in manufacturing, are? And finally, just finish off with any advice that you would give to job seekers right now looking for a new career within a new industry.
So, two quite big questions there. I think the first one I would say you've got to ground yourself in either a technology or you've got to ground yourself in a process. And the world is full of subject matter experts, but they're not necessarily employable people. And it might sound a bit counterintuitive, but when I was looking for jobs prior to getting my first apprenticeship, one of my oldest friends, a guy called Dave Abbott, knows nothing about manufacturing whatsoever. But he told me that if I was going into foundries, I was getting too specific and that I wouldn't make myself widely employable in the future. And I completely ignored him. And he was completely wrong. But he was also right, because if you become too specific and you become too much of a subject matter expert, it really narrows down your opportunities. And I don't mean don't become an electronics engineer. I mean, don't become an electronics engineer that's only ever worked on one product type. Be varied, be willing. If somebody says there's some overtime going over here and it's something you don't normally do, as long as you're able, you're capable, and you can do it safely, say yes. When I did my first apprenticeship, Bill would have me in most Saturday mornings, cleaning tanks, filling up slurries, going into the foundry and helping doing analysis, sweeping up 5S events. None of it was anything to do with my job, but I learned so much from doing that. But also people see it. And I guess this is where it links into advice for people that are trying to get jobs at the moment, especially in new industry, is you've got to be able to demonstrate your value. And an apprenticeship versus a degree only gives the person with a degree an advantage on a CV. Because you said there's a stigma against apprenticeships. But someone with an apprenticeship, say mechanical engineering, though they may not know as much, they may not have gone into as many theories in as much depth as someone with a degree in engineering, they will also have 3 years work experience. They will have, even if they're in a machine shop, they will have learned turning, they will have learned milling, they will have learned all the different processes that are going on. Well, the guy at university will know the theory. But I mean, many people in manufacturing will know when they first have a new tool or a new production line or a new bit of kit, generally it doesn't work first time round because theory is great, but practice is a little bit different.
Most definitely.
So you've got to be able to give your value. Show what it is that you bring to an organization, and apprenticeships do that 100%. They really, really do.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Phill. That was some really great advice there, and something different to what we usually get. Because we've held these interviews now for the past almost 6 weeks, I'd say. So that's some really, really good fresh advice for job seekers out there who would potentially be watching this, whether it be live now or after during the live exhibition from the 22nd to the 26th of March. So thanks again for joining us today, Phill. It's great to hear your story. For everybody watching, watch out for Phil's story in the Made Futures book to be published later this month, titled as Apprentice to Manager, Phill Mason's story, which is also available on the MIM website and Ontic's microsite, which I'll republish today, so it's fresh on our socials, so everybody can have a look at that as well, along with a link to this interview for anybody who would like to watch. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you next week to hear from a Made in Yorkshire member with the Made in Group's Joe Maiko. But thank you again, Phill, for joining.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Cheers. See you later.